Well, quarantine life continues for most of us, certainly in this nation and really truthfully all around the world. So, hey, we decided we got to get together and talk a little MMA, try to take our minds off this stuff. My name is John Morgan in Las Vegas, Mike Bohn up in Toronto, Canada right now. And Mike, I got to be honest with you, man. This morning I had a doctor's appointment. I had a couple errands to run that I need to get done. So I haven't had a chance to watch the news. I don't know exactly what's going on, but I want to talk UFC 249. I'm excited to see Khabib and Tony Ferguson finally get this fight going on. I know the UFC is working their butt off to make this thing happen behind the scenes. Maybe you could fill me in on just the latest, because I am excited for this fight. 5 times has to be the charm. UFC is gonna find a way to get this done. I know it.
I'm sorry to disappoint you, John. I think you missed the most crucial afternoon of news yet. This thing is looking more unlikely than ever. I think it's safe to say Khabib is officially out, unless it's a April Fool's joke he posted or something earlier today. We're all taking it to be the fact that he is out of the fight. What he said, he basically said, had to come to the defense of everyone, who was accusing him of running away, which now includes Tony Ferguson, who reacted on ESPN after, basically saying Khabib should be stripped of the belt. It's his fault. The fight's not happening. He could have done this. He could have done that. But we all know the situation around the world with this coronavirus incident. And I can't really blame Khabib for not wanting to fight here. So yeah, sorry to disappoint you, but I think the 5th time is not the charm, my friend.
Yeah, no, listen, I saw the Instagram post, obviously having a little bit of fun this morning, but just to read it, if anybody hasn't seen it, of course, he says, listen, and this is Khabib, I believe his own words. I don't know if anybody else typed it for him. I know he had it in Russian there as well, but said, I understand everything, and I'm definitely upset more than you to cancel the fight. Probably like all others, I had many plans after the fight, but I can't control it all. The greatest countries and the largest companies of our time are shocked by what is happening. Every day, the situation changes unpredictably. But Khabib still has to fight. Is that what you're saying? Take care of yourself and put yourself in my shoes. There was more to the statement, but to me, that was the key part. As you said, it seems it's out. I mean, the UFC has not come out and I guess made an official statement, but I mean, it's pretty clear in his words that Khabib is not going to take the fight. And understand, so I want to get your initial reaction on that, because listen, he is in Russia right now. There is a travel ban in place. I know there's been some questions about could he even get out. I've got to say, just a guess here, I'm thinking if Khabib Nurmagomedov needed to get out of Russia, he could find a way to make it happen. He's a very wealthy, very influential man, very connected to the governments over there. And I think the Russian government would grant him that flexibility. So I am willing to say that this is not just, the government saying you can't go. I think Khabib took an active decision in this process. But as you said, it's not, it's not a mystery why he would make that decision. We're all dealing with this. And I agree with what he's saying. I mean, this spreading coronavirus, this COVID-19, continues to change the world every single day, continues to take people by surprise every single day. And I think I saw a statement earlier today that, at this point, I want to say it's like 96% of America is in an order to stay in place under anything but non-essential business. So give me your take on Khabib. Essentially, I think actively bowing out of this, because, Tony had a very outspoken reaction, essentially, and you can understand his frustration. I mean, he's been trying to get this damn title for so long now, and this is the 5th time this fight has come together. But, saying that Khabib is scared to fight, I don't know if that's really accurate. Maybe not exactly excited to go out in the world in these particular circumstances, but give me your take on both sides. Khabib saying, essentially, I think making a decision that he's not going to fight, and Tony's reaction to that.
Yeah, I think he made the right call. I mean, this guy has a family. He has a wife. I believe he has a son as well. It seems like he tried to make the fight happen within all his power. He came to the States to finish his training camp when he thought it was there. From all appearances, the UFC did tell him that it was okay to go back, because they were saying the fight was 99% likely to be somewhere in the Middle East or Abu Dhabi, Dubai, something like that. So, I think for him, he went back. He tried to get over there. He had to fly back to Russia. It's not like he just went back home and, didn't really make an effort to make this fight happen. Ultimately, he had to pull the plug. The training camp was probably really deteriorated as well. We weren't going to see the best version of him or Tony Ferguson in this fight. And ultimately, he pulled the plug. I mean, it's a dangerous situation out there for a lot of different parts of the world. And I think it's okay that he made this decision. For Tony Ferguson, I mean, of course, he's going to want to, do what, pile on or accuse him of being stripped of the title. He wants to fight this guy. I think they both really want to fight each other. It just didn't work out this time around once again. We're all disappointed. But maybe Tony will get another fight. I don't know if this fight's ever going to happen again, but for Tony, I mean, I can understand why he's so upset, but I think, ultimately when we all take a step back from this thing, he's going to realize this was the right call for everyone.
Yeah, I think the key thing to me, as I look at the comments in the chat, and I see a user here by the name of LOL. Well, first, that's probably a hint at the attitude of LOL, but said, Khabib can't run forever. And to me, I guess that's the thing that I want to kind of get ahead of and say, listen, I don't think Khabib is running from anybody. I mean, Khabib, I don't think is afraid of fighting Tony Ferguson. Khabib is not scared of fighting anybody in the UFC. I don't think that, honestly, we hear that too often. Oh, so-and-so is scared. I don't believe professional cage fighters at the highest level of the sport are scared of anybody in the division. Now, again, scared of this virus or feeling like there's a need to protect the family, that sort of thing. I totally understand that. So I just kind of want to put that out there. And I don't necessarily blame Tony Ferguson. I mean, part of it, he's still in fight mode, right? I mean, he's still trying to hype things up a little bit. And it doesn't hurt for him to throw it out there that, hey, he should be stripped because, he's been an interim champion before. He wants to be that full champion. If you're going to fight anyway, I don't think it hurts for you to play the politics game a little bit and say, hey, I think they should strip him. I don't think, to be honest with you, that Khabib should be stripped at this point. But I don't necessarily blame Tony Ferguson for his reaction. I don't think it was just necessarily fair either. So you mentioned that, it looks like there may be another fight. Now, I want to ask you, it sounds like that, the one that I've certainly heard floated about is Khabib Nurmagomedov versus, Tony Ferguson, I should say, versus Justin Gaethje. Is that the right fight to make? I mean, I know there's a couple other people that have put their hand in the air, a couple other guys that said, hey, I'll step in, I'll fight. Is that the one that you think makes sense? Because it's interesting there, too. I mean, Justin Gaethje has always been a guy who says, I don't take fights on short notice. I need a full camp. Now he's saying he's willing to do it. Do you think that's the fight to make? And if so, what should be the stakes? I mean, should it be an interim title fight? Should Khabib be stripped? Do you think about that? Tell me what you think about the fight and if it's made, what kind of stakes we should have there.
Well, definitely don't think Khabib should be stripped off the start. If they are going to make a fight, yeah, I think that's certainly the fight that you book, just given, where the divisional standings are. I know Dustin Poirier put his hand up for that as well, but he seemingly has another fight coming up soon. And, considering he's coming off a loss, Gaethje's on a winning streak, I think that matchup just makes more sense. And I think Gaethje was supposed to be the backup fighter for this fight all along. So I don't really know if he's been training, really too much, but he's been more or less had it in his mind that there's a possibility this could happen for several months now. I think this fight was first announced, I don't even know when, like December, November, something like that this was going to happen. And people are irritated that it took so long that they had to book it all the way in April. But, here we are, because I guess for some crazy reason like this. So, yeah, I think if they're going to do a fight, it's probably Ferguson and Gaethje. As far as the stakes, not saying it's fair or anything, but just given history, how the UFC operates, I think if this was going to be the main event of a pay-per-view card, they're probably going to do an interim title. I don't think they go there and strip Khabib just because that would be ridiculously unfair, but I think you'll likely see an interim lightweight title. And I don't think that would make Tony Ferguson too happy, though, so I don't necessarily know what his incentive here is to even take a fight. I mean, what's the problem? I know we talked about this last time we spoke on this with Khabib. You're not going to be able to rebook this anytime soon. He's going to have to, he's going into Ramadan. It'll probably be, September, August at the very earliest that he could fight, assuming all this stuff blows over and we're able to get back to a regular fight schedule. So, if I'm Tony Ferguson, I don't take any fight. I kind of just wait and try to fight Khabib later this year. But if he's going to fight anyone, yeah, it's got to be Gaethje.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you have to point out as well, right, that Justin Gaethje and Khabib Nurmagomedov do share a manager with Ali Abdelaziz, right? So you got to think at the very least, Justin Gaethje wasn't in the dark about how these things were unfolding. So maybe he's had a little bit more of a heads up than we thought. I want to get to another comment here. Me Diamond 44. And by the way, LOL said just joking, guys. I thought with the name LOL that it might be a little joke in there, but I just want to say, because you're not the only one saying that. But I look at Me Diamond 44 and it says, if we've waited this long for Khabib versus Tony, can't we just wait a little longer? What's the big deal? And I think that's an interesting debate topic there as well, and something to point out. So, Mike, I want to get your thoughts on that, because there is something to be said for that, right? I mean, we want this fight. It is the fight to make. But you touched on it there with Khabib Nurmagomedov. He does have Ramadan. That means he's not going to be fighting for the summer. So we can't just, push it back to International Fight Week or anything like that. And let's be honest. I know the UFC is dialed in on UFC 249 right now. And I know UFC President Dana White has said, I remain committed to getting the schedule back full steam ahead. But, man, this world is changing by the moment. And I got to be honest, I don't assume anything about the future right now. And so for that reason, I kind of understand if you're Tony Ferguson why waiting around isn't necessarily a good idea. I mean, you've got a chance to get a paycheck. I think that matters. You've got a chance to potentially, I think what you said is right, take another interim title belt. I mean, I know it's not what he wants, but at least it's gold. And I guess, then you're a two-time UFC champion at that point. I mean, that's legacy or whatever. So I don't know. I mean, to me, I think Tony would be right to not wait. Now, it would be a damn shame if Tony Ferguson were to go out there and lose to Justin Gaethje, which is possible. Anybody can lose to Justin Gaethje. That guy's a monster, because then maybe we lose the fight we wanted. But what do you think from Tony Ferguson's perspective? Is it worth sitting around and waiting and hoping that this fight comes together because it's the fight that everybody wants to see? Or do you feel like you're better served getting in there and taking, the bird in the hand versus the two in the bush, so to speak?
Right. I guess it just depends. Like you said, is it worth? Depends on what the worth is. I mean, if you're the UFC, if you're Tony Ferguson, he seemingly has a ton of leverage in this situation, which often in negotiations, stuff like that, fighters don't usually have this type of leverage. So on his side, if he can maximize that, and like you said, if they can put on an event and make it a safe situation for Tony Ferguson and ex-opponent that he could potentially fight, and if it's a safe scenario with all the stuff going on, all the people there in the venue, all that kind of stuff, and he's able to go in there, I would try to negotiate to my fullest and get the most money possible out of the scenario. And then, yeah, it probably makes it worth it. But if it's maybe for a paycheck that he's not happy with, maybe he is happy with what he's already getting and is able to go in there and do any fight against anyone. But for him, it seems like he could kind of maximize this. So yes, maybe it is worth taking a fight from that scenario. But I guess on the flip side, like you just said, you lose here. He's been working so hard, undefeated for as long as he's been. I think it's like 8 years, 16-1 in the UFC. He's 36 years old now. If he lost this fight against Justin Gaethje or whomever else, I know a bunch of people are mentioning Conor McGregor too. That name has dropped in the chat. I don't know if that's a possibility. To me, it doesn't really seem so right now. Conor McGregor actually seems really focused on this coronavirus situation. But for Tony Ferguson, I think you risk the risk and the reward there. And if the money is worth it, then maybe you do it.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the name Conor McGregor. John Kavanaugh, his coach, has been having a lot of fun, right? Posting a picture of an empty iCal, basically a calendar with just a mystery entry on the 18th. That's been kind of funny to see, but I think you hit the nail on the head too. That'd be a little bit weird, right? I mean, as powerful of a messenger as Conor McGregor has been, and kind of to tell the government to step up and people around the world to step up, I think that would send a weird message. A couple of good questions here I want to ask. I find this one kind of interesting. Mystic Gamer says, asking about basically the consequences, says, do you think there will be any consequences for Khabib going against Dana's perspective on the coronavirus? And I find this a little bit interesting because Dana, it seems to me, is taking this UFC 249 card very, very personal, man. It's like his sole mission in life to make this thing happen. And as we said at the top, I don't think you could just say that Khabib is stuck behind a travel ban. I think he did take an active decision here not to take this fight. That said, I find it to be an incredibly understandable decision that he made. I mean, there are times when sport doesn't mean everything. What do you think here? I mean, Dana, can be a fiery guy at times. Do you think he'll hold a grudge here? Because I'll say this: if for some reason they do decide to strip Khabib Nurmagomedov of his title, that to me would be purely a punishment. I mean, that there would be no logic to that whatsoever. We're in the middle of a damn pandemic. And I think Dana has even come out and said when this whole thing started, I've told everybody if they don't feel comfortable, they don't have to fight. And if he's saying he doesn't feel comfortable, I think he's okay. So I don't think there's going to be an issue, but it's a fair question, right? I mean, Dana's a fiery guy, man. Do you think he's, pissed off that one half of his main event is bowing out here? Do you think there'll be any repercussions?
I just really don't know. I guess it depends if they can save this event with another scenario, and then they ultimately Dana gets to live up to his word and his promise to make this event happen. For Khabib, I don't think there should be, but who knows? We've seen crazier thing happen for sure. He definitely, had a role in this. Like you said, it's not 100% on the travel ban. That seems like that's a huge part of it, but he made the choice to come out and release that statement. We haven't heard anything from the UFC so far. Who knows, when they would have come out, and if he didn't come out and say, I'm out of the fight, when they would have posted their statement, how would they have worded it? Would they have tried to, you know, throw him under the bus a little bit? Would they have, you know, explained it was part of the travel ban scenario? Or would they have put the wording on him? Who knows how that would have gone? So he was the one who came out and said, you know, the fight is not happening for this reason. And so for him, he definitely, like you said, had his foot forward on that side of it. I just really don't know. It's so hard to predict sometimes what Dana White's going to do in this situation. I think it would be a pretty bad look on the UFC if they did come out and strip him in the middle of this scenario. It's not really, you know, the appropriate circumstances to do something like that. This guy's looking after his own health, the health of his family, those around him. I think that's what we all need to be doing in this situation. And we see what's going on in the rest of the world. The UFC is the only event in town, or the only sport in town, trying to put on events right now. They just canceled Wimbledon today for the first time since, I think, the Second World War. So, like, you know, just look what's going on around the world. How are you going to put, you know, sole blame on this guy, or a ton of blame on this guy? Yes, he's not going to be able to fight, but if there's any reason for any pulling out of any fight in, you know, the history of MMA, I think this is a pretty damn appropriate one.
Yeah, I agree with you. And listen, I mean, Dana, for all his fieriness, I think behind the scenes, he's a little bit more reasonable than people might realize. So yeah. I don't think there's going to be
a punch. I haven't heard his reaction, so who knows?
That's right. All right. One other question that I thought was pretty interesting on this. It's Mr. Veljkourser. I don't know. It's VEL. I don't know if that's supposed to be a name or what it is, but I like the question. So I apologize if I didn't get your name there. But he says, do you think this 5-time of this stuff with Tony and Khabib will reflect bad on viewership of that fight when finally it happens? Let's say later this year. So again, we don't know what's going to happen, how it happens, but is there any chance of, like, you know, viewer fatigue or interest fatigue? I mean, I know, like, a lot of us as journalists, everybody kind of joked, you know, in the build up to this fight, hey, don't talk about this fight. Don't tempt the MMA gods. You know, I mean, we kind of joked about it, but what do you think? I mean, is there any chance at all that if, let's say, Tony does go out there and beat Justin Gaethje, and now he's the interim title holder, and now this fight is rebooked, and the pandemic is over, and the world is back to normal, and it's Madison Square Garden in the fall or something along those lines? I mean, is there hype there, or do people just go, I am sick and tired of this fight, and I don't care anymore?
I think you'll see a little bit of both. I think maybe in the lead up, depending on how long, you know, out is announced. This time, I think it was announced way too far in advance. Like I said earlier, like 5 months or something like that. And just right from that moment, it felt like, man, you're just giving this way too much time for something to happen. And ultimately, we couldn't have foreseen this, but something did happen. And yeah, I think next time around, there'll be a little bit of fatigue, but I think once they get in a press conference again or start going back and forth, and then ultimately, if we do get to a fight week, it's not like, you know, the build up for so long really counts as much as it used to, I don't think. I think it's really that fight week where the UFC makes its, you know, overwhelming, over the top pay-per-views and really adds those buys to the final hype of a fight, you know, weigh-ins, press conferences, whatever the case may be for that particular fight week. So I think if someone actually sees them, or we actually see them get together at a, you know, the same city, the same arena, they're at the lead up to that fight, they weigh in, all that kind of stuff, I think people will be really hyped and they'll end up buying that fight.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you there. I think you're spot on there. People might be a little worried, but once they finally get that final face-off, let's hope it's a final face-off. We got enough of those clips in our footage library, man, of these guys facing off. All right, listen, enough about this individual matchup. I want to ask you this. What do you think? UFC 249, I mean, on top of all this, Florida today, which had been reluctant to announce the shelter-at-home orders, they finally did that. Nevada here, I think our original order where I live here was like April 15th or 16th. I don't think Vegas was ever a possibility, but it was officially extended to April 30th that we've all got to hang in place. I did reach out to Nevada State Athletic Commission. I don't even know when they have another meeting planned yet in order to talk about resuming fights. But again, Florida was a spot that I think a lot of people were talking about. I don't know where they can get this done at this point. And again, and Dana's even said it, you know, when he's been doing these media rounds, is that as soon as I find one place, the rules change, and then I can't do it there, you know, and it's all good. So what do you think? I mean, does this get done? And it's funny. I mean, look, I'm not a movie buff, man. I live so far inside the MMA bubble, but that famous Jurassic Park quote always sticks in my head when we start talking about UFC 249, where he says your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop and think if they should. So It's kind of, I think that's really the point they ran, is like Dana's just full speed ahead. He wants to do it. He's expressed why. What do you think, man? If you had to put an odds on it or a percentage on it, I mean, do we get UFC 249 in some form or fashion? We know we're not getting the main event that we wanted, but do we get this thing in some form or fashion, or is it time for us to raise the white flag and say this is over?
Right. Do we get a UFC broadcast in some form on April 18th? Man, I don't know. Last week, I think I was a lot more optimistic. This week, I really not as much. It's I really just don't feel that confident anymore. I think just the options are getting so limited. Like you said, the whole thing is changing by the day. Before it was like, okay, maybe this is an option, this is an option. Like right now, if they announced a venue, it would be pointless because who knows if that would even be a place. They're not selling tickets anyways, so like who knows what's really going on behind the scenes. But it sounds like from everything we're hearing, options are falling by the wayside over and over. I think there was a casino in Oklahoma or something they were considering, and now that has closed. So I really don't know. It's like, if I had to put a percentage on it, maybe 20%, but even that feels a little optimistic at this point. Seems like a really bad idea overall. What's the point? I mean, I understand why, like, yeah, the fighters, we want to get them paid. I'm still, completely for that. I know it seems like they paid some of the fighters from the canceled London show. I don't know how much it has been, if it was, just a portion of their entire purse, anything like that. I would just go ahead and try to do that for this card as well. And every other card that's being canceled, I know that's a big hit to the UFC or a hit to them financially, but it seems like the right thing to do at this point. But it's just, I don't know. I'm not really too confident this goes down. It just seems like not a good call.
Yeah, I don't know. I've been trying to weigh it out myself, and I've said, listen, if there's going to be a card on April 18th, I'll be there. I do think the media has a responsibility to cover it, whether it's the right decision or the wrong decision. I am not one of these people that is coming after Dana White. I know it's an unpopular opinion. I'm not coming after the UFC for trying to continue to put on an event. I do believe serious changes would need to be the way. Like I've said, look, I don't want to stand in a media scrum with 20 other people shoulder to shoulder and side by side. Like that ain't going to make a lot of sense. But I do applaud the UFC for trying to do something, get the schedule started again. I just don't know if April 18th is going to happen, man. There's so many government regulations. It's not really UFC's decision, you know what I mean? It's all these other governments' decisions and that sort of thing as well. You mentioned, the UFC London fighters getting some money as well. I mean, we just mentioned we don't know about April 18th. Do you have any feeling about the future at all? I mean, what's it like in Canada? What's the vibe you're getting up there? Because it does seem like this thing here, at least the feeling is, every day it just gets pushed back further and further and further. I know the UFC said they want to go full steam ahead, but let's say April 18th gets canceled, UFC 249 doesn't cancel. Do you have any feeling of when we start again? I mean, what's happening up in Canada?
Man, yeah, no, it's feels like every day it's getting more dramatic and stuff. Like they just extended the city of Toronto is not going to give any license to public events. So that's like festivals and stuff like that till June 30th now. That doesn't include sporting events, but I imagine with, having crowds in that scenario, like you're not still going to have permission to bring 16,000 or 17,000 people in one place. So I imagine those will get hit under similar circumstances. And yeah, it's just the opportunity to do the stuff that we're talking about here, trying to put on shows and all those kind of things, just like it seems like it's falling lower and lower on the list of priorities right now. It's, about helping people and trying to save lives and trying to get this whole thing under control and make sure it's not worse. Like it's in comparison to the rest in Canada, obviously Toronto's the biggest city in Canada. There's the most cases here. So it's just it's getting worse and worse all around the world. And it just seems like putting on, UFC fights should be not the main priority in anyone's lives. I know that we all want to get back to normalcy and get back to sports. And this is our job to sit here and, be talking about this and all that kind of stuff and react to this news. But it's just, it seems like it's a very sad situation. All the people that are, getting hurt by this and losing family members and stuff. And, hopefully it can all blow over. But to me, I've made the prediction. I don't think we're going to have, sporting events with crowds and stuff in the year 2020. We'll see if I'm wrong, but I think we may get fights or some sort of, sporting events. I know that NBA has talked about putting on, trying to get all the players together in maybe one or two hotels in Las Vegas and have them all attended and ride out the season, maybe doing something like that and have the playoffs, non-televised or televised, no fans or anything. So maybe UFC gets back to putting on fights at the Apex or something. But to me right now, I don't really know, maybe, late summer, but right now it feels like our summer is falling, further and further through our fingers in terms of having anything to really do there, whether it's personal or professional.
Yeah, good to see Marcus Williams, by the way, in the chat, man. Been a longtime friend of MMA Junkie. He actually said as a business owner who has stayed open for business. I can understand Dana White's desire to do fight cards. I know where his business is. I won't say in case he's not supposed to be open, but keep peddling the books, man. Yeah, but I do understand that. And I think what you said is true. You know, I saw some of those NBA reports earlier today as well. You know, I think the idea of maybe doing the rest of the year of the UFC schedule at the Apex, you know, with no fans present, with limited media present, with a difference in how we handle media days, with how we handle weigh-ins, you know, keeping the social distancing, all that thing is going to be real. I guess bottom line is I do applaud the UFC for trying to move forward and trying to find a way to get back to normalcy. But I do think everybody needs to understand that it's not going to be under normal conditions. You're not going to be able to just, you know, jump back into the schedule and everything's just like it was before. So we'll see. All right, listen, a lot of UFC 249 talk. I did see somebody's LOL again. He might be joking again, but he said, has it been canceled yet? It hasn't been canceled yet, but it is changing by the day. You know, listen, Jon Jones was a big story as well. I think we would be remiss if we didn't talk about Jon Jones while we're getting here today. Crazy how fast that story went away, man.
Yeah, man, I was going to say, like, almost, you know, half an hour here nearly, and this is how long it takes to get with him. He, you know, got similar luckiness in his right after the DWI. Some other stuff 249 related came out. It's just crazy how his news always seems to get closely tied in with like something else that happens. Yeah,
it's bizarre. So if you didn't catch up, he did get a settlement already. It includes 4 days of essentially house arrest. And then there's a minimum of a 90-day outpatient treatment, maximum fines and fees, community service, all that is part of it. Important to note, because I think a lot of people were saying 4 days house arrest. Are you kidding me? The New Mexico State did come out and say, listen, to be honest with you, COVID-19 had a big part to do with this. We are not really equipped to deal with this right now. We're not trying to bring more people in. We're not trying to overcrowd the system a little bit. And so, you know, that had a lot to do with it. So I think Jon, I don't want to say, you know, got lucky, so to speak, but I think that's a big part of it. I was a little, I'll be honest. I mean, I didn't expect him to do any serious time. And you know, I don't want to paint Jon out to be a victim, but, you know, I think we've all seen the body cam footage. You know, it's probably not exactly what we first thought when we heard Jon Jones had been arrested for, you know, for aggravated DWI. I think many of us thought that he was out partying and doing whatever else. And, you know, it turns out it's, you know, 1 o'clock in the morning during a pandemic, and he's talking to some homeless people. Definitely had too much to drink. He tested twice over the legal limit. The thing, I'll be honest, that I'm a little concerned about is, you know, the firearm that was found in there and the spent shell casing, and the government, you know, the court system there said, hey, we'll take the settlement, we'll pass that out. I'm not saying that they should have, you know, I just wish we knew more about the case, because that to me is very, very problematic. But I guess let me get your initial thoughts on this settlement. I mean, no surprise that the wealthy individuals, famous individuals, don't always get treated the same way as the common man. But was this an appropriate settlement? And do you think the UFC needs to do more?
Man, first with the settlement, I mean, yeah, surprised but not surprised, I guess. I mean, especially in these times, I think, like you said, that all the stuff going on with COVID-19 probably had something to do with, you know, a little bit in that. And I guess it's fair enough. Like, we hear some of the stuff that's going on, you know, in the jails across, you know, the United States and elsewhere where this stuff is spreading. And, you know, if there's an opportunity to keep someone safe in a scenario, whether it's, you know, house arrest, even when you're supposed to be quarantined, I guess that's probably the fair way to go. But the rest of it, I mean, 1 year supervised probation, that just feels like, you know, we're in a repeat situation. I feel like we've, you know, had these punishments all here before. An interlock in his car, has to, you know, do the breathalyzer before he drives, just all these different restraints and stuff. And he's got through it in the past, and things haven't changed. So I guess I don't necessarily know what huge reason there is to believe that this specific punishment would be, you know, the game changer for him, the one that ultimately really changes his behavior. I know he released a statement that felt, you know, very pre-authorized in some sort of ways, but in there he did admit that he's had, you know, a bit of a, you know, has an ongoing battle with alcohol. I think he called it an unhealthy relationship with alcohol. So for him, I don't know, this all just feels like very deja vu. And my takeaway is, I guess, I don't know why it would make anyone feel like there's going to be any sort of massive change.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. You know, I do see a lot of people, and it's happened multiple times throughout his career when he's gotten into trouble. People say maybe this is the moment that he realizes, and you're right. I don't know that there's anything here that would make you think, okay, yes, this is definitely going to be the big light bulb moment for him where it all changes. And I think that's sad. You know, as far as the UFC stepping in, I don't think, you know, do they need to strip him of his title or anything like that? I really don't see that happening. I think they got to start thinking about it. I mean, they definitely need to have some conversations. I know they've got, you know, their priority is all about UFC 249 right now, but I think they're definitely going to have to circle back and have some conversation with Jon Jones, I guess. And I'm definitely not a psychologist by any stretch of the imagination or an expert in addiction or anything along those lines. But I will say, I guess, you know, he said he has an unhealthy relationship with alcohol, and that's fantastic to admit that. And, you know, there's probably something there that needs to be addressed. But to me, there's something more that needs to be talked about too. And I don't know exactly what that is to put your finger on it. I mean, I've been saying it. I mean, if the guy wanted to get hammered, he could have gotten hammered at home. We're in the middle of a quarantine, man. I'm sure he's never been to his house in Albuquerque, but I imagine it's pretty nice. And I'm sure he could get whatever he wanted. He does have access to a driver. You know, a lot of people say, oh, why doesn't he have a driver? He does have access to a driver. I mean, he could have somebody, you know, driving him around. And he didn't, you know what I mean? And again, not that, you know, I applaud him in some ways for being out there and talking to homeless people. I mean, those are certainly human beings, as he said, too, that need help and need addressed as well. But I don't know if you're a wealthy, famous individual that could be a very easy target that you need to be out there in the middle of the night with too much alcohol. I don't know. To me, there's more going on here than just the alcohol use. And that's what I hope that Jon Jones can seek out, identify, and get help for. You know, I don't know if it's just strictly alcohol abuse alone, because, man, the guy is the greatest fighter we've ever seen. And I know that, you know, sport doesn't necessarily come first in times like these, but you know, I'd hate for him to ruin any more of his career than he has already. So let me ask you a question then too about Jon Jones. What do you think? I mean, reading what you've read, knowing what you've known, you know, I don't think, you know, again, the UFC is going to step in and do anything. Again, we don't know the schedule, so it's kind of funny to talk about the future when it could change in a heartbeat. But do you think it's okay for Jon Jones to start talking about fights again? I mean, is it okay right away to say, all right, let's get this Reyes thing lined up. When are we going to do this rematch? Or do you feel like he should step away for a little while?
I think he'll lay low for a little bit, and that's probably the right call, especially while all this stuff is going on. Like, before this incident popped up, he, you know, seemed like one of the better voices or more reasonable people when it came to this whole, you know, coronavirus situation. He was putting out messages on social media telling people to stay home and stuff like that. We saw his tweets that were very much used against him a few days later after the whole thing popped up, but, like, you know, getting people to stay home. So for him to, you know, come out and start talking about stuff like that when we don't even know when the possibility of putting on fights again, period, let alone a fight for him exists, I'd probably just chill. I mean, imagine we'll probably see some stuff pop up. We mentioned in his statement, it's really important for him to continue helping work with his community, and, you know, he cares about the people in his community, all that kind of stuff. Whether you believe that or not, we have seen him doing, you know, work out there in Albuquerque in the past. So I imagine we'll see something like that pop up, and then, you know, sometime after that, when maybe we get some touch of normalcy, he will, you know, bring up a tweet or, you know, do what he does and send some little shade at whatever person who calls him out or he wants to fight or whatever the case may be. But yeah, I don't think the UFC is going to punish him. We haven't heard any comment from them really, period, on this, besides, I think, their initial statement saying they're gathering information. It's really been nothing since. So yeah, I think, just like I said the last time we spoke about this whole thing moved pretty damn quickly. You know, if we're being honest, the fact that the lapel cam footage comes out like the next day, then we get this thing happening so quickly. I didn't think we were going to be sitting here just a few days later and have this thing basically wrapped up with a bow on it. It's kind of crazy how fast that moved. But you know, for that reason, I don't think that anything really happens, because by the time, you know, Jon Jones gets a fight booked, or, you know, we're talking about him fighting, I imagine, you know, this, of course, will be in a lot of people's memories still, but it's not going to be fresh in the news cycle by any means.
Yeah, no question about it. All right, I was looking at a couple other comments in the chat, by the way. You know, circling back briefly to UFC 249, we touched on it, but since that is the question of the day, Marcus Williams, again, good friend there, is a question for John and Mike. Do you have any idea where Dana White is trying to have UFC 249 happen? To me, it seems like it doesn't make sense to book fights without having a venue locked in. We talked about the struggles. I will say, Mike, I've had a couple conversations with Dana over the past few days, the past few weeks, and every time he expresses his desire and his confirmation that it's going to happen, And then I just try to get a little hint out of him. Well, where do I need to go? What type of clothes should I pack in the bag? That sort of thing. He just immediately stops talking, won't address it. Have you heard anything that you can put your hand on and say, listen, this is what I've heard, and I am buying this, I'm believing this, I have good information? Because I got to say right now, I'll be the first to admit, I have zero idea.
No, I have no idea either. Like I said earlier, I know they were talking about maybe a potential place in Oklahoma at a casino there, on an Indian reservation, but I don't think, it seems like, as I said earlier, that one has closed down. Florida just put the ban out that I think goes into place tomorrow night or tonight or something like that. So to me, I really don't know. It seems like they've run into brick wall after brick wall. It seems like at this point, the United States is completely out of the running, and I don't know where international, what even the possibilities are in terms of having people travel here, travel there. To me, I have no idea, and that's why when you asked me earlier what percentage I was putting on it, maybe now thinking about it, it should be even lower than 20%.
Kind of building on that a little earlier in the chat, I'd seen this one. Partha PB is actually looking forward in the schedule and said, "Hey guys, so is the same thing going to happen in UFC 250 as well? Can Jose Aldo get the fight Triple C?" Now, I think this is an interesting question as well. Again, these international travel bans, they pop up, and who knows how long they're going to last. Again, this is uncertain. And this is another reason why I say, I think I would look at putting the entire rest of the schedule in a year at the apex. I know that's going to cost the UFC a gate, but man, when these international governments are involved, you don't have any say over what they're going to do. But I want to bring this up because it did seem like some people on the card were starting to hear a couple of things, right? I mean, when Felicia Spencer mentions, hey, Amanda, we both live in Florida. How about we just do Florida? And I saw Amanda chime back in and said, yeah, let's do Florida, right? And, you had seen Triple C, the king of cringe himself, Henry Cejudo, put out the call. He said, listen, if Jose Baldo can't make it, how about we have Dominic Cruz step up as well? So it seems like some of the fighters at the top of that card, I mean, are they just reading the tea leaves and starting to be a little proactive? Or do you think, the rumblings are coming that that one's not happening either, or it's definitely not happening in Brazil?
I don't know about the definitely not happening in Brazil, but I think you just kind of have to look at what's going on around the world, what's going on with these other events, the fact that they've canceled, the next 3 shows with a 4th consecutive one looking like it's going to be in jeopardy. I think you just kind of need to look around and probably have some good idea that maybe a trip to Brazil in this climate right now is probably not going to happen, or maybe even the best personal decision to make, to go have a fight down there. So, I'm sure there's a combination of everything. Everyone's talking right now. Everyone wants to know what's going on, when this could happen, when that could happen. It seems like, in some level, though, the UFC is still, not just for this 249 card, but trying to make fights for down the road. I don't know. I think just everything feels in limbo, and I don't think anyone really has any super solid answers of when we're going to get back to having complete fight cards, when they're going to be or where they're going to be. But I think most likely the first place we'll see them would be at the Apex. That would just make the most sense if the UFC can figure it out logistically. I don't think, they're going to be going to Abu Dhabi every single week if that's the only option. That just seems like it'd be a bit crazy, but who knows? So, I think right now I don't really have a good feel. It seems like UFC 250 is probably in a good level of doubt right now, especially to happen in Brazil.
And then that leads me right into UFC 251, right? That's supposed to be in Perth, Australia. And we found out earlier this week, I guess just yesterday, things moved really fast, that Joanne Calderwood kind of revealed that Valentina Shevchenko was hurt and was out of that fight. And then we find out, I believe today, again, that, with not leaving the house at all, my days are kind of running together. I'm going to be honest. I'm sure we're all in that position, right? Where there are no difference in any of your days, so you lose track of when it is. But we find out that Alexander Volkanovski is saying, look, I don't think I'm going to be able to fight by that date either. And not that Perth couldn't host an event with anybody in the main event, but I think that was part of the draw, right? It was having Volkanovski competing on home soil there. So, man, it just seems to me like things are lining up where, maybe the UFC doesn't need to get out on the road. And listen, again, I don't think the Apex is a terrible solution. I mean, you lose out on the gates, and I'm sure, fans around the globe would hate the fact that they're losing that live event experience. But you said it earlier, man, and I'm with you. I wouldn't be surprised if there's not a live sporting event with a crowd anywhere in the world for the rest of this year. And I think that's important to remember too, because and this is one of the reasons I've been saying that I'd like to see the organization find a way to operate is even if we all stay until our homes until May 1st or June 1st or whatever, that virus ain't gone when we get out. It's still out there. We're still going to have to probably pay attention to some of these social distancing guidelines and new kind of operations and way to operate. So what do you think, Mike? I mean, is it possible 251 doesn't happen too?
I don't think in its current form. I mean, yeah, it just seems highly unlikely they do an event in Perth, especially with Alexander Volkanovski unable to compete. I don't think you're going to be able to pull like Israel Adesanya out of your hat or anything. And there are two main draws in the region. And you've had two title fights. I know Volkanovski versus Holloway was never officially confirmed, that rematch, but all signs were pointing to that happening or supposedly happening there. I just think UFC 251 in its current form doesn't look likely at all for Perth. Could they have it in some makeshift fashion in Las Vegas, book new fights or wherever the case may be? Yeah. I mean, I don't even know what we call these events anymore, what order we put them in anymore. Like it's, we're going to have such a setback of the UFC schedule, but I guess we should be looking at just when events are going to happen, period. We had Bellator cancel all their May events or postpone them, whatever you want to call it, through May. It seems like, is the UFC close to being able to have to follow suit? I think the next event after Khabib and Tony, now not happening, but UFC 249 is what, the Anthony Smith Glover Teixeira fight on the 25th. Is that one going to happen? And then I guess you just go event by event and look at it. But if I had to put a guess on it, it seems like May is looking like it's in big time doubt. Could we get into June when UFC 251 is going to happen? That was the first week. That's seeming kind of unlikely too, if we're being honest.
I'm just going to say the Apex is 15 minutes from my house. So if they want to do the entire rest of the card, 15 minutes from my house, the entire rest of the year, I'm down. Let me ask you one non-COVID-19 related question, since I need a little bit of that in my life. The Crispy 64 weighs in and just has a simple question made of simpler times. He said, who do you guys think has the striking advantage between Francis Ngannou and Jairzinho Rozenstruik? I don't know if I spelled that right. Don't worry, the Crispy 64. It's a tough one. You're pretty close, though. You're pretty close there. So, all right, we don't know if this fight's going to happen, right? We're hoping it's going to happen, but we're not going to talk about that. I'm done talking COVID-19 for today. Let's just say, perfect world. We're out here fighting. Who's got the striking advantage between those two?
I mean, I think Ngannou's got the power there, but Rozenstruik, I think, has more overall striking experience, has a longer history, doing that aspect of the sport with his background and everything. But in that fight, which I basically thought was going to be 100% of a stand-up fight anyways, I was going to be picking Francis Ngannou. So I guess that's my opinion on that. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, right? I mean, I really intrigued, but I hope that fight stays together, because I would agree with that as well. I think he's a little bit more polished. I give actually a lot of credit to Francis Ngannou for taking that fight. I mean, I don't think there were a lot of fights on the table for him, and that's one of the reasons that he kind of had to take the Rozenstruik fight. But I always like when fighters that are a little higher up the ranks, that have been there, that have had their opportunities, will accept those challenges from the fighters a little bit down the card a little bit. And Jairzinho, certainly, a hot commodity, but doesn't have the type of pedigree that Ngannou does, but dangerous, no question about it. So I kind of like the fact that he was willing to take that fight, and I hope it stays together. A couple more comments real quick. I don't know if these are related or not, but Howard Rourke says, Morgan telling someone they're an alcoholic. LOL. I don't know what you're getting at there, Howard Rourke. And then in potentially a completely unrelated note, Juan Ramirez says, John Morgan can lead an AA meeting. So I don't know. Related, not related?
Type of dude Dana White was talking about. So I guess I'm a wimpy scumbag or whatever.
I wasn't gonna highlight that one, but I mean, if it bothers you,
we're taking shots at ourselves. I mean, why not?
I dig it. All right, man. Well, listen, spend enough time taking up your time in Toronto. I got to go spend a little time on the second one of these we've done. It's also my day off again. Can we schedule one of these when I'm actually supposed to be working? I'm going to go spend That's it, April Fool's. Man, can you believe this is the second time this fight has been scheduled on an April Fool's Day, or been canceled on an April Fool's Day? Come on, man.
I don't even know what to say anymore. Let's just all have a good cry together.
6 time is the charm, baby. 6 time is the charm. All right, well, listen, I don't think this life is changing anytime soon. We're all going to be in quarantine for quite some time in the future, so we'll definitely get together and do this again. I appreciate everybody that joined in. We'll grab some of the other MMA Junkie staff as well. Hell, maybe we can have a couple of them on at a time. Who knows? We'll check it out, and we'll do it again. Talk soon.